Hi, welcome everyone. So we'll get started here in a minute. I'm Claudia. We've got a couple of other folks we'll be presenting here with, but we'll maybe give it another minute or two just in case we've got a few others joining.
And while we're here, if you would like to, we're going to have a gathering here in a moment so we can meet one another. But while we're here, if you would like to, if you haven't already, you can update your name that's showing on your Zoom page. And also in the chat box, you can drop your name, your role. If you're a teacher in the classroom, which I think most of you are, but we were told we may have a mix of some administrators as well. Maybe the grade of the class that you're teaching in your community, name, classroom, community. You can see who you are, where you are. Nice to see you all. Hi, Alexa. 7th grade. And where is Golden View? Anchorage Middle School.
Welcome.
Nice to meet you. Hello, Jonna. Preschool. They're still adorable at that age. I should say it like that. All kids are really neat, but at that preschool, kinder, 1st grade, they just love you. I loved substituting for that age. You just have to work a little harder by the time they get into middle school. Kind of gain their trust. They have to decide whether you know what you're talking about, whether you're cool enough. Hello, Emily. Hello, Sammy and Sandra. Rabbit Creek, that's also Anchorage area. I remember being there. Hi, Semra. A long time no see. There, Akbay still. Lovely. Nice to see you all. Melissa from Eagle River. Hello, Shelley. There at Lake Otis in Anchorage. I'm trying to remember the name of the school I got to vote at when I lived down by Westchester. It was kind of nice. I distinctly remember being able to both buy treats because they almost always had bake sales along with election day. The kids could fundraise and I got to vote and get a treat all at the same time. I guess that's not going to be happening this year. And I'm not in Anchorage any longer.
All right.
All right. We'll go ahead and get started here then. Hello. Hello. Welcome to NEA's October event 2020. We get to, I'll introduce myself. I'm here with 2 of my colleagues from, we're all from the Association of Alaska School Boards. So if you don't know about ASB, we're a nonprofit, and basically most of all the school boards across Alaska, 50 of them are our members. And so we provide support to our school board members in a couple different ways. We have a governance side where we work directly with the boards, but we also work in the communities directly with the schools and the school districts, administrators, and staff in ways just like this. So wonderful to see you. If you came into a Zoom room for Equitable Outcomes Relationship Building, you're in the right room. You never know these days if you're like us, zooming literally from one Zoom room to another. Maybe you clicked on the wrong link, but here tonight we will be talking about relationship building. We can go to the next slide. Words of welcome. That is a bit of a welcome. We just wanted to say thank you so much. Thank you for all the great work you are doing. Having myself been in the schools for, I gave a better part of 16 years of my life there in one capacity or another. I know this year looks much different than it had. I remember there was always that excitement at the start of the year, but this year it may have been a bit of excitement along with a little anxiousness and unknowns, but here you are working with your kids, so thank you. So next slide. here are our purpose and agenda for tonight. We're going to have this welcome. We're going to get to meet one another briefly. And then we're going to go into some equity and relationships, kind of getting um, some information about equity, thinking about it in the context of trauma engaged schools work, some of the work that we've done. It's one of those chapters, but it's really central to a lot of the work we do, as you may know. We're also going to do some exercises, testing out some of the tools, doing some individual reflection and group reflection using one of the tools that we use from one that we use quite a bit for establish, maintaining, and restoring relationships. We call it as an abbreviation EMR, and it's a pretty helpful tool if you want to think systemically of how to reach different groups of kids. We'll do a bit of share out, and then we will take a look at, if you haven't had a chance, ASB did a partnership with Department of Ed, and I don't know if you all have seen, but there's a Transforming Schools framework. And then along with that, now there is a Transforming Schools Toolkit. So there's actually a printed one. I printed off from the doodle copy, but they're beautiful printed slides. So if you haven't seen it, we will take you on a little tour of the website if we have time there, and then we'll thank you and close. And one thing we know to be true is that it sounds like quite a bit of time, but I think it'll go by fairly quickly. So next slide. Here you see me with my family. We are so glad to be with you. I am the shortest one in the photo, if you're looking at the screen, the top left in the purple. My husband and each of my kids are taller than me. Semra, you probably recognize my two. They're both college age now. And I'll let Claudia and Heather say hello themselves.
Hi, everyone. So I'm in that, well, there's a couple of silly photos up there, but I'm in the middle of that one. You can see me with a couple of my sisters. One of the things that we do here at ASB is that I get to work with students and I get to be silly and I get to have fun. And one of the things that we'll talk about is that our value of humor really helps us as we have these conversations. We're here to learn from each other, and we're also here to laugh together and enjoy our time together. So I'm lucky that I get to work with families and with students, and I've seen personally in my own life the difference that a relationship can make. And so I think of relationships as this great equalizer, where a lot of the barriers, some of the gaps that students come into our schools with, or maybe are experiencing some crises, or different things that are going on, trauma that can be historical. Some of our relationships can help with that, and I've experienced that firsthand. And so I'm lucky enough that I get to sometimes be that relationship for some young people. I get to be that for them because I get to work with young people. So thank you all so much for being here. I'm so grateful that we get to spend some time having a conversation around this really important topic.
Hi, everyone. It's really great to be joining you in the Zoom room together. That is an opportunity I think that we have through Zoom, is to connect across the state. And so I'm in the bottom silly picture. And as I was thinking about tonight and thinking about relationships, I was just thinking about how, as a transplant to Alaska early in the 90s, how important building relationships has been to me, and building my intentional or my chosen family in Anchorage, when I started out in Anchorage, and then moving here to Juneau to have the great good fortune of being colleague with Claudia and Lisa. So in my photo, you see some of my chosen family here in Juneau, and with Claudia, and I know Lisa too, we all do value silliness and humor. And so I wanted to bring forward that photo to share with you. So delighted to be here together.
All right, so we often start our conversations together in a lot of different settings, with these agreements. And we find that it's helpful for us to meet in these ways so that we can get the most out of our time together and learn the most that we can from each other. So we'll go through these briefly, but in every chair, a leader, and so each of you is bringing some valuable experience to the rest of us. And so we look forward to hearing from all of you. We have some things that we're bringing to the table, and we're also here to learn from you. So in whatever capacity that you serve and the experiences and knowledge that you have, we invite you to bring those forward so that we can all learn from you.
Speak to be understood, listen to understand. With this one, we just want to acknowledge in these different places and spaces we create some time for us to have some small group conversations. We'll have some time for individual reflection as well that we may be able to share with each other. And when we do, some of the topics sometimes, they can be harder, for a variety of reasons. And I think in this busy world, as people say, sometimes, we just want to, remember that, try to give people, give them the benefit of the doubt when they're speaking. If they say something and you don't quite understand and it sounds like something like you maybe not quite agree with, give them some time and try to think about what is the intent of what they are saying. And then also, as you speak, try to convey your message in such a way that people understand it. I know we can feel very emotional, very passionate about a variety of topics, but we really want to try to speak in a way that people will be able to hear what it is we're trying to say. So, and also you'll want to listen in such a way that you're not listening just to answer. So really try to take a moment to say, what is this person trying to convey right now?
And value our time together. So it's a short time. It'll go by really fast. This is the only time we'll be in this room with you all in this combination of folks. And so with this combination of experiences. So let's make the most out of each other. If something doesn't make sense, ask us. Let's make sense of it. But I think you putting your questions out there, you really being here and being present is going to make sure that it is going to ensure that you have a good experience and that we can all learn from each other. So let's value our time together.
Challenges to solutions. This one, I really appreciate, I know having been in the classrooms as a parent, as a teacher, as a volunteer, and then being on school boards and now working with a variety of districts all across the state on a lot of different things. And we know in education, we certainly have our shared challenges, but when we come together, hopefully, while we want to acknowledge that, and we do want to try to, while we're together, benefit from, as we hear different people we're with together, just maybe get that synergy and that brain power and see what we can do to consider some possible solutions.
And as we mentioned earlier, our value of humor helps us. So we're talking about some serious things, but we're also here to enjoy the time that we have with each other. So, that will be part of the experiences that we get to laugh together and enjoy that time. So.
And finally, take care of yourself, take care of each other. I know for a number of you, you are juggling schedules and time and meetings, and thank you so much for being here. We appreciate that. If you need to take a moment, maybe to grab some water, hopefully you had a time for a little break before going from your last classroom meetings to now, but if not, if you need to quickly grab a snack, if you can feel your blood sugar dropping, do so, and hopefully you come right back and join us. But just do take care of yourself, and then the take care of each other. Again, that's just, I often kind of pair that in my mind with that speaking to be understood, listen to understand. As you're in conversations with others, if you see a colleague having a difficult time, maybe you can offer some sort of word of support. All right.
All right. Thanks all. And so I know we've heard your name and your district in the chat. But if we could also hear your voice, so if you could tell us just your name, if you just want to tell us where you teach and the grade that you teach, and then that last prompt is what helped you succeed in school or life? So we don't have too many folks on, so how about we start with you, Sandra? I'll just kind of go down the line, and it kind of makes things a little faster and a little smoother, not to have to guess who's coming next. So how about you, Sandra?
Hi, my name is Sandy Buchwald. I have completed my first year here in Alaska. I moved from the Midwest, from Illinois, last summer. I am a SBBS behavioral teacher. I have grades 2nd through 6th grade. I believe it's very important in building relationships. Most of my kids have a lot of trauma, a lot of history behind them, trusting. They feel that they've been unsuccessful in school, so I'm kind of like a last resort. So I feel it's very important. I have learned to succeed in school from those relationships that I have had with my teachers, feeling that sense of belonging, feeling a sense of being loved in the classroom. Many of the kids come because they need that love and attention. So I believe that's really important for our kids, well-being.
Thank you so much for that. Thank you for sharing, Sandra. That's kind of what we know, and we've got some research and some slides and some things saying that. But I think we all kind of know that as educators, and so thank you for reinforcing that from the experiences that you've had on how important this is. How about you, Jana?
Hi, I'm Jana. I teach developmental preschool special education in Anchorage. And I think when I think about what helped me succeed in school as a student, I think first about my family and the support that they provided, that foundation. And then I think about loving teachers. And so I think both my family and my teachers inspired me to become a teacher. And I guess to echo Sandra, I've just highly valued the relationships that I can build with families to try to share that same love that was shown to me when I was young.
Thank you so much for sharing that. Yeah, that loving the whole student and having that engagement with families also is has a big impact on the kind of connection that the student feels with the school itself and with the adults there. Thank you so much. How about you, Alyssa?
Hi, my name is Alyssa. I'm a speech pathologist with the Anchorage School District. And both ladies have already said everything I think I would say. It pretty much sums up everything, doesn't it? I mean, if you have all of that foundation, you're probably going to be successful in whatever you do.
Mm-hmm. Thank you so much. Great. Thank you. Welcome.
Thank
Glad
you.
that you're here. And Tracy, how about you? What helped you succeed?
First, I have to be able to unmute. There we go. I'm Tracy Salyards. I work in the Mat-Su School District at Mat-Su Day School. So I am a K-5 special ed teacher in a behavior support program. And the thing that helped me succeed in school was sports. So making connections with lots of different adults and people from different backgrounds.
Mm-hmm. Thanks, Tracy. How about for you, Emily?
Hi, I'm Emily. I work in the Anchorage School District at one of the home schools, Paideia. I'm a special ed teacher, but in the homeschool role, I'm a liaison, which means that I don't teach my own classes and I connect students with services at their neighborhood schools, and it buys them in the homeschool piece. And yeah, I think similar answer to the what helped me succeed, just having a good foundation at home and lots of support and relationships and the ability to be involved in extracurriculars, which also takes that home support piece.
Mm-hmm. Thank you so much. All those adults, and then I think sometimes within the there's kind of that structure that's built into sports at times that can be helpful. So there's a lot of different pieces there that can help. And at the base, there's a lot of relationships. So thanks, Emily. How about for you, Semra?
For me, as I think about it, what helped me succeed in school was really my family. I think about my father, who was a teacher and a beloved teacher in Juneau for many, many years. And together, he and my mom planted this seed for a lifelong journey of learning and loving of excellence in education. And I guess so it transferred into life as becoming a teacher. And in my life, I think my love for children is true and it's deep, and I have a gift of being able to build relationships with children and really know them individually.
Mm-hmm. Thank you so much. Thank you for that. We are often drawn here because of some of those connections and those relationships. And so it makes sense that we all come with a lot of different gifts already and a lot of different practices that we bring to this conversation. So thank you so much for that. How about for you, Nicole?
My name is Nicole Dieter, and I'm a special education teacher in the Anchorage School District at Inlet View Elementary. And I am the only resource teacher there right now, so K through 6. And then I think for question 3, what helped me succeed? Honestly, I don't think I would have been able to do any of this without my parents. They allowed me to move back in to get my master's, and yeah, without them, I wouldn't be here.
Thanks, Nicole. All right, how about for you, Samantha?
Hi, so I teach developmental pre-K, just like Jonna, I hope I'm saying your name right, at Gladyswood Elementary. This is my first year teaching preschool. For the last 7 years, I've taught resource. In the last 4 years, I've been with grades 5 and 6. So I'm having a real age difference being with the preteens with 4-year-olds now. So a lot less sarcasm, which I'm enjoying. Thinking about how did I succeed in school, just thinking about college and going through my master's program, I had a really great support system of colleagues, well, I guess you should say classmates at the time, and my professors. They were just incredible. They were the people that got us through it. And then now being in Anchorage, teaching here, you know, I fall to my coworkers who have become friends and mentors, and they kind of get me through the trials and tribulations of teaching, whether it's joys or, you know, pitfalls or whatever it is, in a way that, you know, I can come to my family and they're super supportive, but they don't always understand in a way that coworkers are able to. So I lean on them a lot.
Thank you so much, Samantha. Yeah, those relationships, they still are carrying us through. How about for you, Corinne?
Hi, my name is Corinne. I apologize in advance if you hear baby noises in the background. Doing a little balancing. I work in the Mat-Su School District at Palmer High School, teaching agriculture. And I'd say that there's kind of 2 different things that help me succeed. One, a lot of people have touched on, is like the support that you can get, whether it's from your own family or teachers. I got a lot of support all through schooling and in life in general. And then also some intrinsic motivation. So I guess to interpret that to other people, to think about building that relationship so you can see what motivates them and then help with them and incorporate that into what they're doing in school or in life. So those were 2 things that I thought helped.
Thank you so much, Corinne. How about for you, Shelley?
Hi, I am Shelly. I am a school counselor at Lake Otis Elementary in Anchorage. And, you know, when I think about what helps me get through right now, and I think in my professional career too, is just finding that humor, being able to laugh about things, whether I'm working with teachers, staff, my principal, and the kids too. And I think that that's really a fundamental relationship foundation. If you can laugh together, you can usually talk about other things too. So laughter and humor, that's super important for me.
It builds that connection around something else that has nothing to do with learning, and that's a really good thing. And it can actually really help our brains too. So thank you so much, Shelley.
Yeah.
Thank you. How about for you, Alexa?
Hello, I'm Alexa Flores. I teach 7th grade math at Golden View Middle School in the Anchorage School District. I would say that the relationships I had, whether that was with my teachers or my family or my friends, helped me succeed as well as having a sense of humor.
Great. Thank you so much. How about for you, Heather?
Hi, I'm Heather, and I'm at ASD at Rabbit Creek Elementary. I teach 3rd grade, general classroom teacher. And then what helped me be successful in school is, I guess, being stubborn to overcome laziness, because I did not like failing. So that was one of the main things. And then my parents and teachers encouraging me when I was failing and providing help when that was going on. And then parents, you know, telling me that wasn't okay, that didn't meet their standard. They didn't always know exactly how to provide help, but they did get me help, and by informing my teachers that was a struggle. So.
Thank you so much for sharing that. Yeah, I think I can really connect with that. I think there are times when my parents just knew, like, hey, school's really important, but they didn't always know the steps. And so I think that can be sometimes that gap or that link that's missing, even when we know, hey, this isn't quite going right. I don't really know how to correct it. Thank you so much for that. And how about for you, Ashley?
My name is Ashley Bias, and I am currently working at Gladyswood Elementary within the Anchorage School District. I am currently an instructional coach, but I have just left the 4th grade classroom as well as special ed before that, so definitely branching out. In order for me to succeed, it's definitely been my support system, whether it's friends or family. They've really kept me staying positive and keeping on track, making sure that my mind is in a positive mindset. As well as giving constructive and positive feedback to myself. I do well with positive praise, and I feel like my support system gave that to me and allowed me to commit to my goals.
Great. Thank you so much. Thank you all so much. So I feel very similar. I feel like, and there's a math teacher here in the mix, but I feel like it's really interesting that connection to learning can really depend on the relationships that we have. And then there's also, I heard some folks say, I had that internal grit. I really wanted to succeed, or I really wanted to push forward. And even that sometimes maybe isn't quite enough, and that other kind of support comes in, or it's developed through our relationships. And so through the encouragement or through the things that we see. And so I just want to say thank you all for sharing a little bit about your experiences, a little bit about what helped you succeed. We've got hundreds of years of kind of teaching experience actually in this room with all of you. And so I think maybe not hundreds, but we've got, at least 100 years or something of teaching and experience in this room. And so we're here to learn from you. And what you'll find going on to this next slide is that here's the research, and here's some of the, educational work, some of the research catching up with what you all have just shared and with your experience. We know that relationships are the foundation to a lot of the work that we want to do in our schools. So if we want for trauma to not be a gap for our students, which sometimes it tends to be, that relationship can be the bridge. And so when we have students that are traumatized, they're afraid, they don't know, oftentimes if they can trust you or what this learning is about, once you build that trust, a lot of other things are possible. Same thing, we find that relationships are key to partnering with families. And so whether you look at national research or even some of the Alaska specific resources, we find that when partnering with families, we can get to learning, we can get to support in the classroom, we can get to a lot of those things that seem really hard and difficult to get to if we build relationships, if we focus in on those things. Same thing with a positive school climate. If we in our classrooms are able to cultivate a positive climate between our students, students feel more connected and more supported at school. They tend to link up better to the things that we're teaching. And so we can improve learning through better relationships between the students and between us and the students. And we also find that when we try to make our education more culturally responsive to the communities that we serve, those relationships are again key. So how do we know we're doing well? How do we know what practices to incorporate? How do we know what makes sense as approaches to our students if we don't check in with our communities? And so those relationships are key. And communities and folks in the communities feel way more comfortable sharing with us or telling us what they really think or informing and building together with us if we have a relationship. And the other piece that I think is woven in through some of this, and I've mentioned, is that student performance. So if we're looking at grades, if we think, hey, you know, I'm trying to improve these scores in a particular subject, we see that students do better when we have that relationship. And it's kind of funny, but it does make sense, right? Like my relationship with math really dependent on what teacher I had. It's crazy, right? And it's true. I didn't do very well when I didn't have a good relationship with my teacher, and I did much better when I did. And I was the same kid in either classroom. And so it really makes a difference to how well that we do, that our relationships are there. And so when we're looking at particularly closing the gap that can be created by trauma, so next slide, please. We know that trauma itself can have a particular impact that makes it very difficult to trust others. And when we think about things that are traumatizing, adverse childhood experiences, it makes sense that trust and relationships would be impacted. And as educators, we have the ability at times to bridge that gap for our students. Each person in a student's life can be a positive role model and can be a healthy relationship for that student. And so when we have those positive relationships, it can really help bridge that gap. And thinking about relationship as an equalizer, as something that can really help students, we know that each of you are doing that. We know that you're trying every day to connect to your students in your classroom. And so moving on to the next slide, here's a little bit of the science as well. We know and we see that transformation with our students when we have a relationship. Sometimes students go from being really quiet to now being super chatty, or to thinking that they're not good at something to seeing small progress and actually starting to think, hey, I'm actually not too bad at this. So we see a lot of brain changes, physical brain changes that are then manifested through behavior when we build those relationships with our students. Now, because of so many of our students come in traumatized, and that is hard then to get to those relationships, those particular students are even more important to try with and to build a relationship with. And so what I've seen is that at times that trauma becomes a barrier and that we struggle to build those relationships. And then that trauma compounds the gaps that students have in their learning. And so if we want to equalize our learning for our students, giving students access to those relationships and trying to be that caring adult can be one of the biggest things that we can do. And oftentimes we have some biases, and we'll talk more about that. Some relationships are easier to build than others. And those others that are not easy are oftentimes due to trauma. And so if trauma becomes the barrier and we don't overcome that barrier, it becomes a cyclical thing where we see students say, I'm not good at school, I'm not very smart, this isn't for me. And so trying to think about our relationship with each of our students and being more systematic. So those students that don't have relationships or have historically struggled with that can have another chance at those trusting relationships. And so Heather will cover just a little bit more about that science there and why, and here's the research, right, catching up.
Thanks. I wanted to, just like Claudia said, talk a little bit about the neuroscience of relationships. So often we know that relationships, and so strongly believe that relationships, like they're foundational, like Claudia was showing in the drum, like they're the center of the drum that bring the resonance to all of the outcomes that Claudia talked about. And there's science behind it. And I think we heard how relationships can help us regulate and get to our learning part of our brains. We heard that in the gathering, as you each talked about the importance of relationships, whether that was in family or school or in sports. And Claudia just mentioning how, in reflecting on the teachers that she's had, that there were some teachers that she could do better in their class. So what was it about the relationship and the relationship's impact on Claudia that helped her get to her learning brain? So like you to meet your nervous system or remember your nervous system. This is probably something that you all are very familiar with. So I'm probably not telling you anything you don't already know. But when I was getting ready and looking at this slide, boy, I was thinking about mornings that I have spent on Zoom, and it seems like everything has gone wrong in my morning. And I was thinking about how I'm really in those times, and maybe you can connect with that. I don't know, maybe not. But I was thinking about those times that I'm really in fight, flight, or freeze mode by lunchtime. And thinking about how my sympathetic nervous system is really activated when things start to go sideways and things start just building up. And it's really cortisol that is flowing through my body at that point, which is activating that fight, flight, or freeze mode. And so I was thinking about this one day where by lunchtime, I was just like in fight, flight, freeze mode. And I had a colleague who texted me. We'd been in a Zoom together. And she said, hey, I noticed things are not quite right when we live close to each other. And she said, do you want to go for a walk together when you have a break? And so we did that. And the presence of my colleague and my colleague reaching out to me activated my polyvagal system, which started to release oxytocin so I could start to feel safe and connected. And then in walking together, that activated my parasympathetic nervous system, which released dopamine and serotonin, so helped me start to self-regulate. So it was like a twofer. I got the oxytocin from being with my colleague, and I got the dopamine and serotonin from walking and starting to self-regulate. And so I think particularly in the context that we're in now with Zoom, how we can ask ourselves those two questions that you see on the screen. How can we deactivate the sympathetic nervous system in students that we're working with to kind of cut off that cortisol from flowing? And how can we activate the parasympathetic and polyvagal nervous systems so that we can really activate dopamine and serotonin and oxytocin? And so what does that look like in practice really. And I think this next slide walks us through just what it looks like when relationships are at the foundation. And so the regulate, relate, and reason. So the first part is working with students to regulate, again, so that they are releasing dopamine and serotonin, and that's counteracting the oxytocin. And then that second piece, that relate, there is where relationship becomes really important. And relationship is important in the regulate too. I'm sure you see that every day, how you are helping students regulate, that co-regulation, when you are partners in that regulation with them. And so again, that relate part, helping to release the oxytocin in students' bodies to help them feel safe and connected, which I think in Claudia's story, we heard how that got her into her learning brain so that she could be in that place to learn, and that was different in different classrooms. Her oxytocin levels were different in different classrooms. And there's a note here too around co-regulation, that we working with students and working with our colleagues, it starts with us regulating ourselves so that we can be in that place to help students regulate, so we can co-regulate with students, so we can relate, which ultimately gets them into their learning brains.
Thanks, Heather. I was thinking of when we had presented this and worked with, you know, with an in-service with a couple districts, Heather and I, and throughout it we weaved some different regulation, you know, some different breathing exercises, some ways, you know, just knowing that the staff would be encountering many moments probably this fall where things may start going sideways, where you're starting to feel stress, and knowing that, you know, teachers don't often have a lot of time in their schedule. You know, it's not like you can go take a half day to go to a spa to go regulate yourself. So just remembering there are ways that you can regulate, you know, maybe just through stepping outside and taking in a good couple deep breaths. So thanks for that. Okay, so the next slide, there we go. Here, we'll let you take a moment to read. I see I've included a quote up there. If we carry intergenerational trauma, and we do, then we also carry intergenerational wisdom. It's in our genes, it's in our DNA, like Kazu Haga had shared that quote. And of course, we know here in Alaska, a lot of Alaska Native families, a lot of the students we work with, Native and non-Native, you know, may be experiencing trauma. And we know right now, during the pandemic, a lot of our families and ourselves are being impacted by the pandemic in a variety of ways and feeling some trauma, hopefully some very manageable amounts, but there are some of those families that have experienced trauma even before the pandemic and may be experiencing it even more. But, you know, through that all, just recognizing that, that with that intergenerational trauma, there is also a great deal of wisdom and resiliency within the families. And so if we can help build those relationships with our students, with our families, we can help them tap into that resiliency factors. And I just wanted to, mention, there's some things for people, for those of you who've been living in Alaska for quite some time. You may have had some classes on it in your teacher training or through some of your professional development that may be offered through some of your partners in the community. But, just recognizing that both American Indian and Alaska Natives had one of the reasons there is so much trauma. There's many reasons, but one of very large reason that there is a great deal of trauma and mistrust with the schools is there was the Indian Indian boarding school policy, which had moved hundreds of thousands of Native American students from their families. As much as 83% of these students were forcibly removed. So, and that intergenerational trauma, that's part of that. We're seeing that residual effect from, not acknowledging it and then not dealing with it. And, you know, it just became this exponential thing. However, now, thankfully, people are becoming aware and understanding of what that is. The other thought, I guess, with this slide, we just wanted to point out, you know, is a mindset of just, so one part is awareness, the other part of a mindset. I want to share a different quote by John McKnight, who said, people who want to help low-income communities should see them as half-full glasses, places with strengths and capacities that can be built upon. So just knowing that, you know, if there's one thing to be true, it doesn't matter what, which student with family, all families, you know, whether it's the natural birth parents or the guardians of the children, they all want their kids to succeed. And so this is something we can try to build upon. Oh, so I'm sorry, Claudia, I was asking you to unmute, and myself I muted too. So hopefully you weren't saying anything too great. Yeah, just yet.
Thanks, everyone. I never thought we'd say these things to each other, you know, in a pre-COVID world. But here we are. So just, you know, bringing this quote forward as well, that there's always a story behind a student's behavior. And if we tune in carefully to what the student says or doesn't say, we can learn a lot. And we don't have to know the specifics. We don't have to know what trauma or what's going on with this family specifically. We just need to know that there's something going on that's a barrier, and that a relationship can often get us a little closer to finding a solution to that barrier, and to also having a partner that's fairly invested in finding that solution themselves. And so having a way to have more equitable relationship building for our students, that's what we wanted to talk to you all about today. And here's some assumptions that we're walking into this conversation with together. And you all have shared a lot of these already, but you value your relationship with your students, and that you already spend a lot of time and have a lot of strategies for how to establish, maintain, and rebuild those relationships when something goes wrong. And we also want to acknowledge that you want to get better at cultivating those relationships. How can you, are there some biases? Are there some things that are getting in our own way? And, you know, I'll give you my own examples where I've seen that my own biases or my own processes were actually getting in the way of certain students. And so we want to get better at it. We want to do it more intentionally, and we want to be equitable. And we also want to acknowledge that it would help all of us if we had more time to plan and reflect for this. We're often running from one thing to another. We often haven't had a lot of training in ways that can help us recognize the things that could be getting in our way. It would also help if you had more structures to talk about with your colleagues, to talk about some of these things with your colleagues. And so we're hoping to have a little structure here today where you all are talking with each other. And if you had concrete ways to think about how to equitably do this. So if we could get more concrete, those things would help. So those are our assumptions going into this, that you've got a lot of knowledge already, that we're all working to get better, and that hopefully this time together and talking with each other will also help. And so here's one concrete tool that we hope can help equalize that relationship, those relationships that you're building with your students, and then potentially also help you be more systematic as you're building those relationships. So we call this the EMR tool. It stands for establish, maintain, and restore. And so thinking about perhaps what routines, protocols, rituals do you use, what structures do you use to establish relationships with all students, to maintain those relationships, and that maintaining can really come into play after breaks, after something happens with a student, if they're gone for a little while, or if something goes wrong, if we need to restore those relationships, right? Or if, you know, we've had some disagreement with a student. how do we restore those relationships in a systematic way? So we're hoping this can be a tool that can help you do this a little bit more systematically and potentially get you to stretch out a little bit and think about strategies that can help you reach those students that you're struggling with, or those relationships that are a little bit harder to reach. So before we go into our individual reflection, is there anything that folks want to share? Anything that came up for you as we were sharing? We've shared a lot, but anything that came up for you, or anything that you want to share as we were having this, sharing out this content? All right, so,
Is that
you, Samra?
Do you mind sharing the EMR slide again? The one that was right before?
No problem.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm. All right, so hopefully you also have access to the PDF too, so you can, you don't feel like you've got to write everything down. That can feel a little bit stressful. But this is a slide that's helped me think through some of my relationships with my students. Or this is a tool. And you know, one thing I'll mention is that I've found my own processes, or my own lack of being systematic, getting my own way. So I coordinate a youth leadership conference, and it's a lot of students, about 100 students. And so when the first year that I did it, and they all came in, and I found that my brain could only handle really learning so many names. And there was kind of two mechanisms that I guess my brain was utilizing to learn students' names. One, I think, was just my own, who I was. So I had some personal biases there. So if there was a student that really connected with a story that I had shared, and they came up to me, or they felt comfortable with me in some way, I'd learn their names, right? I had some extra interactions with them. And then if there was some student, the other way was that if a student got in trouble, or if something went wrong, right? If we needed to chat with them about something, or you know, and so it was those two extremes. Students that were at the front of the class really wanted to connect with me, had a lot of questions, or connected with me for some particular personal reason, or because they got in trouble or something wasn't going quite right for them. There was a lot of students in the middle that I wasn't learning their names. And so for following years, when I was doing the conference, I had to purposefully, before I went into the conference, really try to learn everyone's name, so that there wasn't students that wanted to connect with me but couldn't, because of such a short time, not letting it be due to chance, because how a student connected with me really impacted the kind of experience that they had. And I do think that our protocols or processes can help us, or sometimes they can get in their way. And sometimes we don't even have a process. It just happens, you know, by chance. And that they may not be systematic enough to catch all students, or to get past that gap that trauma can be. So going into that next slide here, and we're going to spend 5 minutes in individual reflection. But what do you already do to establish, maintain, and restore relationships? And there's probably a lot that you already are doing. And then what makes some relationships successful? And what might you need to do to reach those relationships that you struggle with? So I think Heather will have a timer for us.
Are we ready to take about 5 minutes for individual reflection? We encourage you to take out some scrap paper, jot down some notes, and we'll take 5 minutes for reflection and then about 5 minutes for a break. Stand up, stretch, touch the floor, move around a little bit, and the timer will help us keep track of that time. Are we ready? Anything before I set the timer?
So 5 minutes to do some reflection, and then 5 minutes to stand up and stretch, get water, and then we'll come back.
I think so.
All right. Thank you. Welcome back, everyone. And so everyone had a good stretch break. Thanks for taking a little bit of time to reflect individually on what relationships feel a little bit easier and some of the things that you're already doing, and then maybe which relationships require a little bit more, and so what could help there. And so we're going to be moving into some breakout groups so that you all could have those conversations with each other. And so, Heather, I wonder if we can share the link to the document as well. Thank you. Thanks, Lisa. So if you follow the link there, there'll be 3 breakout groups that we'll be splitting off into. And there's some notes there. Go ahead and choose a note taker, a facilitator if you feel like you need one, or you all can kind of just have a conversation together, and then someone that would want to share out afterwards. But here are some of the things that you all will talk about. So what are those relationships that are easy, low-hanging fruit, really important? Do they come a little bit easier to us? What relationships are harder? But you can still have a relationship. It's more of a stretch for you. And then what relationships need a ladder? What are relationships that are challenging to you? And are there any patterns that you see for those relationships that are hard? And like I said, for me, I found my process was something that got in the way, and maybe my own, who I was in some ways helpful to connect with some students, and in some ways not. And then what strategies could help you reach those that you struggle with? So we'll be spending 20 minutes in our breakout groups. Go ahead and take some notes.
It will be
and
helpful.
We'll keep a timer for you.
And it'll be helpful if you notice which breakout room you go to, because we created a space for each group to have their own place to record notes. So it'll say group 1, 2, 3.
So I am the queen of all things Zoom and breakout today, and I have the breakout room set up. It's set up so that you should go automatically to your breakout room. If you don't, you'll end up in the main room with me, yay, and we'll sort it out from there, and I'll get you into a breakout room. And like Lisa said, the timer's set automatically for 20 minutes, and then you'll have a minute to wrap up conversations, and then you'll be pulled automatically back into the main room, which might feel a little bit rude, so I'll apologize in advance for that. Okay, have good conversations.
Glad that you guys had some time to reflect. So we're going to come back now that we're back together, and we're so glad that you had that time to talk with each other, do some peer sharing, peer learning. It's always nice to hear how others are doing things. And then also we're going to hear back from between the groups 1, 2, 3. So group 1. That it was fun. I don't know why Google does this. They just assign random names. So we could see that the anonymous blobfish was taking notes in group 1. So whoever was in that group, maybe you decided on who you would like to be your speaker. If you could share out, we'll give a few minutes for each group to share a few highlights. So if you might share how, what relationships came easy, which ones were harder. Share maybe a bit about that, and then if you could focus in on sharing out a few strategies on how you reach those that who you kind of struggle to connect with. So thinking about who is easy, who is harder, and what are some of those strategies you use to connect with them. So I'm going to go ahead and start with group 1.
Great, so I'm going to be the spokesperson for group 1. Husband's playing with my dog behind me, so I'm so sorry if that gets distracting. So we were talking about the easy relationships are typically the kiddos that have a positive attitude or outgoing or, more mellow, easygoing kids, what you wouldn't call behavior problems or anything like that, just because they are really well mannered to begin with. And And the same goes with the families that you interact with, the ones that answer your calls when you call or respond to your emails or, interact with conversations that you're, approaching them with. Whereas the more difficult ones, or we were talking about some of us were resource teachers, a difficult relationship can be when you're just called to come deal with the behavior. You're often seen as the enemy. And it can be really difficult to form relationships with those kiddos because you're often seen as just the person that comes calling when they're having a bad time. So trying to foster those relationships, which I'll talk about after question 3. But then we were also talking about not just relationship with students, but also relationships with within the building with fellow adults. So again, because some of us were resource teachers and some of us are gen ed teachers, we were talking from both ends that as special ed teachers, sometimes we get in conflicts with the gen ed teachers because they either see the sped kids as like your kids or they're my kids and they don't want to give them up. And so just having a relationship with, depending on how many gen ed teachers you work with as a sped teacher, can be really difficult just with their verbiage and their language that they use as, who these kids belong to. Some sped teachers want them all themselves and some gen ed teachers want them all themselves and some want to get rid of them. And so it's a fine line with trying to work with all of the different personalities to figure out what's the best way to balance that. And then to foster those relationships or to help strategies to repair them. We were talking about having routines where, you spend time on Fridays. You clean up academics 10, 15, 20 minutes early, whatever it is. And you play games together or you do a get to know you activity or just, you put it away. And I've found that kids are often more responsive when they're feeling like not all eyes are them. So like when you're having a card game, sometimes conversations flow more easily. We also talked about how, have small groups in your room for kids to eat lunch with you. It's always really special when kids want to eat lunch with their teachers. It's kind of like out of the ordinary and fun. And so we kind of struggled a little bit with what is the best way to fix relationships with fellow teachers. We can be really good at bridging relationships with kids, but with coworkers can be a little bit more difficult. So we didn't really come up with a great strategy for that, but we definitely talked about that. I'm just looking at a little note we said. It can be challenging because you want to keep to yourself. So a lot of us agreed that, if you're frustrated with a coworker or student, you kind of just want to shut your door for the 5 minutes you have and just kind of like decompress with yourself and shut it all out instead of dealing with it. And sometimes that's enough to have you move on and sometimes it's not, but there's so many hustle and bustles during the day that sometimes that's really just what you need to move on. So I think I probably left out a lot of the things we talked about, but those are the main points.
Good highlights. Thank you. Thanks for that, Samantha. Yeah, you hit some really great points. You have a lot of experience, a lot of real life times. We can all easily imagine this. Those of us who've been in this classrooms, well, even if you haven't, parents can imagine. You know that there are those families where, unfortunately, if there's the time with some schools, hopefully your school is not like this, where they only hear from the teachers or the school when their kids are in trouble, and so just thinking about those relationships, of course now my mind is blanking and it is evening, but just just that positive reinforcement, or conditioned response, thinking about that. It's like, what are we trying to, so hopefully in those relationships, just kind of blending, taking a pause to think about your families and hopefully reaching out to all of them in some sort of positive way and not waiting for only when, the student is in trouble or acting out. So they don't have that response, and also, just not personalizing it, recognizing sometimes, for some parents, they have, they are providing their student a lot of support, but maybe some kids, as working with spec ed, some kids have some behavioral issues that they're working with, and some days they're good days and bad days, and they may be new to you, but this parent is bringing their kids through from year to year, and they know when they get that call, they're just like, oh no, today was a bad day for my kid, you know, and just not personalizing and realizing, oh, you know, just that they are also juggling things and kind of probably having this moment of wondering what might have happened for their kid. So I totally understand. Thank you for providing that safe space for your kids in the classroom. You know, that talking about those small groups. You know, I just know that some kids naturally they look forward to lunch. They have plenty of places to go, lots of friends, and some kids are quieter and maybe don't have that confidence, and maybe that relationship with you helps them feel connected and a little more relaxed and special and seen. And having that safe space for those kids is a wonderful strategy. So thanks for sharing that. All right.
And I just wanted to add one thing, Lisa. One thing that I have found that some folks use is a tracking sheet where they mark, hey, this is the kind of interaction I've had. Was it a positive interaction? Was it an interaction around behavior? Was it? And so then you actually become more aware of, you know, how often am I interacting with this family in this particular way? And then you can start to see a little bit more of that. There was a teacher that said, you know, I feel like I interact with all my students, but then when he put in that additional layer of I'm tracking what kind of interaction I've had, I can tell whether I'm also interacting with them in positive ways or not so positive ways. But oftentimes our own minds can play tricks on us if we're not systematic or tracking in a particular way. So you might find a tracking form, you might find some way that helps you kind of keep track of those interactions so you can be a little bit more systematic, if that's helpful to you all. But I have heard that could be something that can bring it to our consciousness.
That student contact log, it's one of the resources I think we list that is listed in the trauma toolkit, and it's kind of a little bit of an accountability, you know, and maybe it's something, you know, you wouldn't want to do for very long, but, you know, if maybe take a couple week period and just track, you know, with each student, positive interaction, negative interaction, maybe just to keep a tally. And but with it, it's a little bit like that. I don't know if anyone else does this, but, you know, I know that people do keep track of like a food log, a nutrition log, you know, for a couple weeks, just because they're like, I don't know why, you know, how did I put on those extra 5 pounds and realize that they're eating like crackers by the handfuls, you know, or whatever. So just one of those things. Sometimes just kind of having that awareness and tracking for a couple weeks might help. Thanks for that, Claudia. So group 2, we had, looked like the pink alien was taking notes. I think you guys put, groups 2 and 3, you guys actually put names to your group. So who would like to share out a few juicy bits from group 2? Do you guys go 1, 2, 3, not me? Do you guys have a person?
No, I think I'm group 2.
Okay, great, thanks. Thanks, Tracy.
Yeah, so as far as things that were easy, age came up a few times in our conversation. Like we all have our comfort zone with groups. We had a preschool teacher in the group, 2 behavior teachers in the group, and I believe a middle school teacher in the group. So kind of age came up, like our ability to connect with certain age groups would affect whether or not it was easy for us to establish a relationship with them. We talked about family involvement, whether they came to us with some social skills that their family would reinforce. And the other group said manners. I think that kind of plays along into that. And our big one-word answer to all these questions was trust. Every one of these, when we talked about every single one of these questions, our answer was trust. So kids that trust us are easy to deal with. The kids that don't trust us are harder to deal with. They're the ones that really challenge you. If they don't trust you, it's really hard to work on their deficits if they don't trust you. So we were talking about building trust with them and actually respecting the kids and giving them a sense of belonging. That would kind of be our ladder to building those relationships. Something that came up too was accepting their apology. Like part of our process at our school is they apologize and then we have to accept their apology. And then we have to reinforce that tomorrow's a new day, you can try again tomorrow. So like they know that they have that opportunity to try again. So that helps us. For me, I said it was harder to deal with kids, and it was harder to deal with the kids. Like I work at a school where they like punch and kick you and all sorts of things. And it's harder for me to have a relationship with the kid that's assaulted me, basically. It's harder for me to deal with those kids. Like I want to make sure I'm in a safe place when I'm dealing with them, and it's always a question of like I have to make sure I'm safe before I can just sit and have a conversation with them and work through the process. Whereas my other I was trying to find her name. Sandra was saying like she's able to build trust with those kids because she shows them that she's not afraid, that she is like she's there, like she's gonna be there no matter what. Like she has a good conversation with them, so she finds that it's easier for her to deal with those kids that those harder behaviors. But she kind of instills with them that they can trust her to that she's not going anywhere, kind of, so to speak. So for her, she said those were kind of, she was able to build a relationship with them better. So I think maybe that was what we were talking about. The ladder of building the ladder was all built on trust. Our big thing was like, what do we do to build trust in the classroom? How can we build that trust? And about using a sense of humor with them, trying to be with them when they're not in a crisis situation, building a relationship with them when they're not in a crisis mode. And I think that's what we talked about, a strategy that would help us reach them are struggling, is to get them when they're not struggling, so they trust you. So we're back to trust again. I mean, that was a big bulk we talked about, and I think Sandra said you have to say what you mean, and then you have to mean what you say. So you can't make any false, you can't make I don't know, like you can't say a consequence and then not follow through with it. You know, you have to say what you have to do what you say you're going to do. Otherwise, they'll lose their trust. It has to be trust has to be a cut and dry thing in all of this.
That makes sense. Thank you so much for sharing that, Tracy. I was listening and imagining, I can imagine that the age preference, that makes sense. Myself, I like the littles, like being with the little ones. They were just adorable to me, and I liked, seeing their little, when they're young, they're just so eager to learn, it felt like, and you could just almost see the light bulb kind of popping off. But my husband loved, he did many years of going in with junior achievement and loved working with middle and high school, and he had that sense of humor and rapport that worked really well for that. I was thinking about, thinking the ones that where you had to build that ladder, and the ones, who had maybe more behavior issues and acting out physically. And I was thinking that it makes sense that would be harder. And yet those kids who are coming in, you can likely imagine that if they're doing that, they haven't developed those SEL skills, those social emotional learning skills to, these kids, some of them who come from places of trauma, that's the way they deal with stress in their home. Maybe they have not learned how to, if they do things that are bad, that's when things get hurt or they get shamed. And so from you provide a safe space, but also modeling. That's not how we do that. And this is in that thing about that trust of meaning what you say what you mean what you say, having that consistency, providing some sort of a stable environment, providing them those SEL skills, deregulating for yourself, shutting that door when you need to, but helping them learn how this is how we can calm ourselves down, and building those relationships and trust at other times. But I was also thinking about the ones, for some of the kids, it's also, I think, a matter of confidence. It's trust and confidence. Some kids act out, some get quiet and withdraw. And so it's also needing to develop that trust so they feel safe to, you know, if they say something and it's wrong, that you're not going to hate them, that you're not going to embarrass them. And so that relationship that you start building with them and showing them, you know, it's okay if you don't have always the right answers. We're just looking for input, and they can start feeling comfortable interacting and coming to you with questions if they have them. But for some of these kids, it's not always safe. And so you are modeling that. And so thank you for that.
And if I can add one thing just very briefly is,
sure.
Tracy, going off of our colleagues' strengths, so sometimes with our kiddos that we're really struggling with, you know, and there's a colleague that says, you know, I can build relationships with that student, or I have one with that student, and this is what works. Sometimes that working across a team to help a particular student can help each of our strengths come forward. And we get triggered ourselves, and so different things might trigger you versus a different person. But knowing ourselves and working as a team and trying to find each other's strengths can help us. So I just wanted to kind of throw that in, that sometimes a team approach to a struggling relationship or a student can help.
Thank you, Claudia. Thanks for that. Thanks for sharing that, Tracy. It's all coming back to me being in this school. It's been a while, but it's coming back to me. And thank you guys for the good work you do every day. I think, so group 3, thank you for sharing out. It's really wonderful to hear some of these strategies and what's easier and harder. So group 3, who's in group 3 and who would like to share out?
That's Shell. We had Semra, Ashley, myself, Jonna, and Corinne. And a lot of the same things we've already talked about. You know, the kids who easily talk with you, it's easy to build a relationship. We did talk about those quiet kids who work really hard in school and are not a behavior issue. Those kids, we have to take special notice and to reach out to them because they're not drawing our attention for any behavioral or academic needs. We really have to search them out to build that relationship. And then we then spent some time talking about one of my students in particular who, as our notes say, is rare and exhausting, where many people in the building work hard to build a relationship of trust with him. But because of his past, trust is not easily earned with him. I don't know if anybody's really earned that trust with him, but we're all trying. And so the group kind of threw out some good strategies that we've all used in different circumstances, like the 2-minute conversation over 10 days, usually having a positive impact on your relationship with the student, having that private one-on-one conversation, just you and them. The 3-to-1, the positive to negative, or positive comments to redirects, even sometimes a 6-to-1 to try to build that, that positive connection. Making sure the students have peer relationships, because oftentimes if the adults are struggling, the other peers, their classmates, are struggling with that hard to reach child as well. So trying to nurture those peer relationships. And making connections with students about their outside lives. If you have those conversations with them and you learn about their siblings or maybe things their family does, and you're able to talk about things with them that's outside their school life, that makes a big impact on someone. So we just kind of problem solve those ways you use to try to connect with someone who makes it hard to connect with them. And then we spent the last couple minutes talking about challenges with Zooming and trying to reach those kids that are already hard to reach, like my difficult one, and how it's even harder now with not being able to be together.
Right. I was thinking of that as you guys were sharing. I was thinking, I remember what that looked like in the classroom, and I was thinking, what does that look like now? For our larger districts, I think some of our rural schools are able to do in person, and so they still, it probably looks the same there, but for the distance learning, that makes an entirely different. And so what does that look like to you? What kind of things are you seeing for these same types of students, for the ones that you knew, for the virtual? How's that?
Well, the really, really challenging kids, behavior-wise, sometimes just aren't even showing up. So we talked about that, like what we're doing to try to help get these families engaged, help to give them tools to try to be engaged. It's hard, and trying to meet them where they're at by offering suggestions or ways that we can try to help to get them, help get their kids online, get the family, get their technology, just ways to try to help.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Right. Yeah, I really think about this. I think there are a lot of concerns about our kids losing ground just generally. And then the kids who we know who are already were struggling before the pandemic and now. And you just wonder the impact and trying to keep them engaged so that they don't become hopefully not chronic absentee and then hopefully not, dropouts depending on the age. Just try to keep them. And, it could be these relationships that will keep them. And it often usually is the relationships that they have formed with people just to keep them at least coming to class. And then, baby steps. And maybe it could be, even as they are acting out, the one place where things are known for them that has some stability, has some routine, which we know helps these groups of kids. So, yeah, my hat's off to you. The things I think that I've heard a little bit from some of the other conversations we've had is just making those phone calls to parents. Just parents are, I think if you figure you're struggling and the kids are home, they're also struggling and like they want, they would really, I think some of these parents are really wanting some input from you, like how can I support these kids? And so as much as you would like some input, like what kind of day can I expect with them? Or, getting any feedback of like whether this kid is struggling with any certain content, the parents are like, any tips that you would have to help me keep them on task, And so it's a really good, unique time by having at least being, the challenge is that they're home. The good news is they're home. And so maybe you can connect with the families who are really wanting to connect with you and give you some info and get some tips. Well, thank you for sharing that. I really hope you guys enjoyed or, got some good discussion and some thoughts and sharing. So, okay. So moving on to the next slide. Appreciate your guys' engagement. Let's see. I'm going to move on to the next slide there. Please, thank you. That's what we just did. And we just wanted to point out this, we did a share out. Oh, also, that's right. We shared out a discussion, but we were thinking what we did here with you guys today, the EMR, you guys will have the slides that, as an extension activity, this could maybe become something that could be done at a staff level, answering this discussion. It could be probably really helpful for you guys during maybe one of your, I don't know if you guys are doing weekly meetings. I think some people are doing it differently in different buildings, but it could be really a helpful discussion about how are we reaching, which kids are we having are easy, which ones are we having a harder time with, and what are some of those things we can do to reach out to help support those kids who need a little extra help. Okay. Here, we're just letting you know that that Transforming Schools framework and the Toolkit for Trauma Engaged Practice in Alaska, that framework is something that was brought together by several district input from, I think, Heather, was it a couple hundred different teachers, staff, administrators, counselors, all gave feedback as this was being developed. You can see each one of these circles is a chapter within this framework. And then they created, it was really a great reference for people across the state. It was given input and it was a collaboration between DEED, ASB, AD and VSA, First Alaskans Institute, some input from the suicide prevention. Several organizations helped to come together, some really great thinking minds about how to support students and families, with trauma, people who are doing some work with that. So they all gave input to that, became this research, which was helpful. And then they said, well, this is great, and we would like some more resources and some different tools. And so the toolkit was just recently launched. So if you go to this website, you will find both. And there have been Tuesday webinars on each of these chapters. And they, They have recordings for the ones that just happened. I think we've gone through 4 now. And then they're still every Tuesday, and I think the last one is on December 1st. So you can register if you would like to join those. Claudia, do you want to share this one?
Muted. Okay, thanks, Lisa. There's also a few others that ASB is putting on for you all through this platform. So if you're interested in any of these, you'll see Lisa's name next to them, Conrad Frank and Laurie Grassgreen, but you might see a similar mix of folks talking about some of these other outcomes. Really the lens is equity, trying to get more equitable outcomes for our students and trying different strategies for that. So look for those or reach out to us if you've got questions about those workshops. And we, we'll go ahead and skip that closing circles, but we just want to say thank you so much for being here, for sharing your expertise with each other and with us. And thank you for what you're doing with our students to get them prepared for school and life, and for them to be successful in those 2 avenues. And I know that you're going above and beyond every day to do that with our students. So I just want to say thank you so much for being here. Thank you so much for being committed to our students. I'm just very grateful to have been part of this. So thank you again.
Thank you, guys. And best to you. I hope that our schools are able to stay open, and maybe our infection rates will start coming down and you can see those smiley faces in person. That would be wonderful. I think the kids would love that too, as much as they don't think they do. From the smaller schools I've heard that did open, it sounded like there was a lot of excitement when they were able to actually come into the building. Schools are just not the same without kids in them.
All right, reach out to us for any other resources or if you have questions. But thank you all so much for your time today.
Thank you. Good to see you guys. Thanks for your time.